श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Now, towards the end of the text, we have to do something about this Sakshi. What is Sakshi? Ayyo, witness. Meaning of the word Sakshi. What is the meaning of the word Sakshi? Witness. We can't have the witness hanging around at the end of the teaching. Because then what will we have? Duality. Me, witness. I am Sakshi, after all. We have determined that, we hope. And then, what is everything else? Other than me, witnessed. So this witnessed problem will always be there. And then so, we have to do something with this Sakshi. So thinks Vidyaranya Swami. Then we can say, then we can tell him, why bring in the Sakshi at all? If you had to remove it, you shouldn't have brought it in. What's the point? You just say, okay, here is a wonderful house. You can stay in it. Oh, really? Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to bring in the moving truck. Can I have the key? Yes, you can have the key. Then you move in. 10 trucks worth of things you arrange everything. And then you are told, you can't stay here. You have to move somewhere else. Not fair. Why did you introduce this word Sakshi? And then you had this big, discussion, whether it's inside, whether it's outside. I sat through this discussion, going along with you, inside, outside, and at the end of it, I myself did not know whether I was inside or outside. I was confused. I went through all this, and now you say what? Sakshi needs to be gone, or we have to do something about this witness. Why bring in this witness? There is a reason. And the reason is best explained in a nyaya, in a what is it called? Maxim called Shakha Chandra Nyaya. Shakha Chandra Nyaya means showing the moon to the baby. The logic of showing the moon to the baby, 1 year old, 2 year, doesn't know what the moon is. Here moon, don't think of a crescent moon, it's a full moon, okay? So showing the moon to the baby. So the mother wants to show the moon to the baby, she carries the baby outside and says, we are going to see the moon. And what does the baby say? The baby says, where's the moon? I don't see anything. Wait, you'll see. So the mother positions herself so that the moon is shining from behind the tree. Do you see that? She asked the child. Looking at the tree, the child says, is that the moon? No, that's not the moon. That's the tree. Can you see the tree? Yeah, I see the tree. Okay, do you see the lower branch? Oh, that's the moon. No, that's not the moon, silly. Do you see the branch? Yes. Do you see the upper branch? Oh, that must be the moon. No, that's not the moon either, but do you see the upper branch? Yes, I see the top branch. Now look in between. Yes, that's the moon. A similar nyaya is going on here. So first we had what? Aham vritti and idam vritti. I notion and this notion. This notion covers the whole jagat. The world of objects is swaha, swallowed up by the word idam vritti, this cognition. And then there is what? Aham vritti, I notion. The cognition or the understanding of I, this I notion, ahankara. Why is this separate? Because one is behaving like the cognizer and the other one is what? Cognized. One is there and strutting around saying, I'm the boss, I know everything, I'm the knower, I'm the seer, I'm the thinker, of course I'm the doer, and yeah, sometimes I'm done in by other people's doings. This is the ahankara. So the aham vritti and the idam vritti, simply put, they are what? The pramata and prameya. We have encountered this. You would have definitely encountered this in other retreats and classes. Just the terminology has been changed. Why are these Vedanta writers keeping on changing the terminology? So that you can keeping on being awake. That's all. Because if you say Atma, 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 A for Atma, B for Brahman, C for Chit, D for Dharma, been there, done that, some more time I can just snooze. This is what one will think. So, Atma means what? Atma is described in many, many ways, depending on the audience. Many names are there for the Atma. Atma is there, Chit is there. Suddenly the Shastra will use the word Chit. Suddenly the Shastra will use the word Bhuma. Who? Bhuma. Narada is surprised. In the 8th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad, that is what happens. 7th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad, Narada goes to Sanat Kumara, says, I know many things and I have heard from people like you. Bhagavad Sadrishebhyaha, I have heard. What have I heard? That Atmavit Shokam Tarati, the knower of this self, crosses all sorrow. This I have heard. Please help me cross the sorrow. Shokasya param tarayatu Bhagavan. Make me cross this sorrow. Sanat Kumara has to understand where to begin the classes from, especially with somebody like Narada, who is so erudite, very, very learned he is, extremely learned. Tell me what you know, Narada, so that I can decide whether to do Vedanta 101, 201, or start on a graduate course. Tell me what you know. And then he lists a whole page of stuff that he knows, which is chanted without a full stop. It just all comes out. He starts Rig Vedaha, Yajur Vedaha, Sama Vedaha, Atharva Vedaha, Shiksha Kalpo Vyakaranam, Niruktam Chandas Jyotisham iti. All the Vedas and the Vedangas are done. Upavedas also he knows, Ayurveda, Dhanur Vidya, Nakshatra Vidya, Shastra Vidya, all these things he knows. He knows the Upavedas, he knows this, he knows astrology, he knows astronomy, he knows Vakoha Vakam, he knows the art of soothsaying, he knows everything. Fortune telling, yes, check. Soothsaying, yes. What is that? Numericals, Vedic mathematics, yes, everything he knows. Sanat Kumara says, aha, I see your problem now. You do know a lot, Narada, but you do know a lot of nothing. Yeah. How is a lot of nothing different from a little bit of nothing? No difference. Oh, I know nothing? Yes, you know nothing. Why do I know nothing? You know nothing because of which all these bodies of knowledge are there, in whose presence, in whose light all these bodies of knowledge are born, are sustained, and are resolved, you don't know that. That one thing you need to know. Oh, I'd like to know that. What is that? Bhuma. It's Atma only. Bhuma. So here also we have some new terminologies that therefore we have to look at carefully. First is what? Idam vritti. This cognition. These terminologies are not new, they may be new for us, that's all. So they are from the aham and idam are borrowed from Adhyasa Bhashya of Adi Shankaracharya. Idam vritti, this thought. This thought means this cognition. And it includes the world of inert objects. And of course, other than you, everything is inert anyway. There is nothing sentient. Everything is inert except the one who says everything is inert. Who is that? Yeah, don't look around. I. So this whole world of inert objects comes under one preposition. This. That's all. This. What about that? That is also included. Remote objects are called that and this. And so everything in the whole world of this and that is what? Inert. This is called idam vritti. Then we have the cognizer. The one who says this is called aham vritti. Because the one who says this clock, this mic, this book, this cup is the one who has a special relationship to that which is cognized, namely the cognizer. The seer, thinker, hearer. That will come a little later. But first, cognizer. Because I am the conscious being that can make all these objects evident. I am the only thing that is self-evident, or the whole object world is what? Inert, insentient, not self-evident, and I am the one who can declare the existence of this pot. What do you mean you can declare the existence of this pot? The pot does not have the ability to say, I exist, aham asmi, sada bhami, kadachinna aham apriyaha. The pot does not have the ability to say that at all. Pot doesn't say that. Who says this is pot? I, the cognizer, the self-conscious individual. I am self-evident, everything becomes evident to me. So the pot cannot cognize itself. And I, with all these pramanas, as we saw that earlier, objectify this world of names and forms. Then of course we have a thing. What is that? If supposing I say pot doesn't exist, or if I don't see the pot, let's say the pot is just somewhere, I don't see it. It's hidden. So what do we have here? An uncognized pot. An uncognized pot, the object of my potential sight, does it exist or doesn't exist? Does the pot exist if I don't cognize it? Don't say somebody else will cognize it. No. Let's say no one has cognized it. Does the pot exist or not exist? Very interesting. Extremely interesting. It goes very close to that Buddhist koan. Which one is that? If the redwood tree falls in the forest, will it make a sound? Will it make a sound? Yes, sound it will make. Why? Because it has a certain velocity, it's falling, and then it's depending upon the body of the tree, there will be a crashing sound. If you say that, some of you said that, to that I will say, is a sound a sound? Is it sound to say that it is a sound without a pair of ears? Can you call a sound when there is no pair of ears? Can you call a pot as seen without a pair of eyes? So therefore you see how deeply important this aham vritti is, and how it is like a peacock, vain. Aha, I am the one, I am the namer, I name the whole universe. All the universe of names and forms I have named. And if you look at all these microscopic, like what is that called, fossils, they are also named after the fossils who discovered them. So they are also named after the people, the scientists who discovered them. And everything, this naming has a lot of power. That's what happened when we were colonized. All the names of all the cities, the whole country was changed. Everything is changed because it's an exercise of power. Naming is full of power. And so the ahankara, each time it names something, and especially if certain things are named after itself, it just puffs and puffs and puffs with pride. East or west, I am the best. I am the only one that is here. I am the seer, I am the hearer, I am the doer, I am the singer, eater, everything. And so the ahankara is relentless in its grabbing for more power, because really speaking, it's a very sad entity. Why is this ahankara, which has so much power of naming things and making things, bringing things to light, why is it a sad entity? Because it suffers from atma ajnanam. It is a spin-off of the I, it is not aham. That's why it's called ahankara. Ahankara is nothing but Brahman, but Brahman, we have to see, is much, much more than the ahankara. So the ahankara which grieves because no matter what it acquires, no matter how many committees it sits on, no matter how many leadership opportunities it has, no matter how many things it has the power to name, is sad, is unfulfilled, just like Narada, who knew so much, but still went to the Guru and said, Soham, not Soham of Vedanta, okay? Soham means this, all these things which I know, this I am, this much I am. I am the bunch of all these things that I know, Soham. Actually, Soham here means Hoham, yes. Soham. Bhagavaha shochami, I am still subject to grief. So this is the aham vritti, that is a miserable creature, sad, and does not know how to overcome the sadness. So in order to overcome the sadness, what does it do? Keeps on acquiring things, keeps on strutting around, keeps on showing off its power, keeps on naming things, keeps on cognizing things, and then in the process somewhere, what does it do? It identifies as the agent of all action, and it also identifies as the recipient of the results of action. It drives itself to a corner and imprisons itself and throws away the key. That's what it does. Karta, one bar of the jail, bhokta, another bar of the jail. Karta, bhokta. The whole prison is made up of what? Doership and experiencership, considering I am the doer. I alone am the doer, alone am the agent. And then what else am I? I am also the recipient. I am the recipient of other people's doings. This is also there. So this has a name. This aham vritti is the name for this ahankara in relation to the internal world of our own thoughts. So I thought, aham vritti, this thought, idam vritti. Now, if we go back to the example of the moon between the branches, aham vritti and idam vritti are the lower branch. Together they comprise the lower branch. And what's the upper branch? Sakshi. Exactly. Then what are we looking at? We are looking not at the Sakshi. We are looking at the truth of the Sakshi, that Brahman, which is symbolized by the moon. Only difference is that the moon is seen, Brahman is not an object of sight. This is just an example. So now, if we keep the aham vritti and idam vritti alive on the one hand, and if we keep the Sakshi also alive on the other hand, then the knowledge will not be called non-dual. So therefore what happens? The idam vritti resolves where? Into the aham vritti. Aham vritti has to resolve, kicking and screaming, into the Sakshi. And what happens to the Sakshi? If the Sakshi remains, then it will always, it's a relative term. It's a relational term, Sakshi means. Witness. Witness means what? What are you witnessing? What are you watching? Who are you seeing? Witness always brings in an object. It brings in an object, whether you like it or not. So the subject-object duality is not at all transcended. And transcending the subject-object duality is Brahma Vidya, is that which I have to understand. That is what I have to see. So therefore, we are already well on our way to querying the nature of this Sakshi. So it started in verse 15 itself, and what was it said? Swasthana samsthito deepaha. So the Nataka Deepa, which is in one place, is equal to the Sakshi, and the Sakshi is what? Everywhere. The Nataka Deepa, the theatre lamp is fixed in one place. Sakshi cannot be fixed in one place. Where is the Sakshi? Everywhere, sarvataha. And then it was pointed out in verse number 16 that this inside-outside business is not from the standpoint of the Sakshi. Inner vritti, outer vritti, all this is not from the point of the witness. What is it from the point of? Body. So, this cognition is everything outside the body. I cognition, aham vritti, is everything within the body. Hunger, thirst, all this, how it is cognized? It is cognized within the body. You don't say, I see my hunger over there. No, it is here. So, but this distinction, inner and outer, antaha, bahihi, is made for what purpose? So that we can still gain the knowledge, even though this body is a huge deterrent. This body mind sense complex is a huge deterrent in a way. It's a blessing and a deterrent. The buddhi is a blessing because only in this body you can gain this knowledge, but it's also a deterrent because one is bogged down by the body mind sense complex, always thinking of, oh, now I'm angry, now I'm sad, now I'm upset, now hungry, oh, now I'm thirsty. Then the hunger also becomes very specific. I'm not hungry for cereal, but I'm hungry for chocolate cake. Children will talk like this. So all these things, this body-mind sense complex already gives a spatial orientation. It's not that the Shastra is giving a spatial orientation. Aham vritti is inward and idam vritti is outward. No, Shastra is not doing that. There is already a spatial orientation of me and not me as far as this body is concerned. So if supposing something hits my hand, somebody goes like this while walking, inadvertently, somebody goes like this, you say, hey, don't hit me. What is this me? Where does this me extend? To whichever extremity is the longest in terms of the limbs. Maybe it's the tip of the nose, where the face is concerned, maybe it's the middle fingers. This is where I exist. This is what the ahankara thinks. This is how it is. This is where, as far as the body goes, this is where I exist. And Pujya Swamiji used to point out a very funny thing. What would he say? If you hold your hand up like this, what is this? Me. This is what? Me, 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 me. But what is this? Not me. What is the space? This is me. This is me. What is this? Not me. Not me. Me. Not me. Me. Not me. Not me. 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 Again not me. Not me. Do you see how strong this inner-outer orientation is? If a bullet zings between the two fingers, you say, it did not hit me. Thank God, saved. So the body naturally becomes a barrier to understand the very subtle nuances of this teaching, because in relation to the body, I have the spatial orientation, internal and external. It's not that the Shastra is doing that. The Shastra is just helping us to discover something which is already there, the distinctions that are already there. So then that was told that from the standpoint of the body we can have in and out. But from the standpoint of the Sakshi, if I hold my hand up, where is the Sakshi? Sakshi? Yes. Sakshi? Yes. Exactly. This is also Sakshi, this is also Sakshi, this is also Sakshi, 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 Sakshi. This hand is now what? Swallowed up. The hand may as well not exist. Why? Because it is all seen as Sakshi. So the internal external distinction is made only from the standpoint of ignorance. Why Shastra is indulging in ignorance? Because it has to talk to you. Okay? Yeah. It has to find ways to talk to you. And you have bought into this ignorance, so it comes down to your level and talks to you. This is the style of the Upanishad. First it will say, yes, there are many things. Yes, you have to have accountability. Yes, you have to have responsibility. Yes, you have to be, you have to have karma. And if you do wrong things, what will happen? You will have papa you will have. If you do right things, you will have punya. The Shastra has to bring us up like children. If you do this, you will get a reward. Otherwise, go sit in the corner of the room. So then, after the child is fed on this diet, when the child becomes an adult and capable of seeing more, then only the Shastra allows one to let go of all those rubrics which had been set up in the first place. They were set up because I already had been thinking that. I am subject to guilt and hurt, therefore the model of karma is there. I want to redeem myself, therefore atonement karma is there. I don't want to feel guilty, therefore, okay, prayashchitta is there. Go and give dhanam, go and do this, go and help out somebody. I want to get rid of my karma, therefore the means of getting rid of the karma are there. But in the wake of knowledge, what the Mundaka Upanishad says very clearly, kshiyante cha asya karmani. All the karmas are gone, poof. Why? Because you, who is the head of the setup, have disidentified as the karta. No karta, no karma, no karma phala. Correct? Karta is gone. The karta was a bad dream, a nightmare. In the sleep of ignorance, which morphed into a nightmare of kartritva, bhoktritva, buddhi, the Guru wakes you up. Guru sprinkles some Upanishad water, Mahavakya water. Ajnana nidra suptasya. For the person sleeping the sleep of ignorance, what does the Guru do? Throw some Mahavakya water. What? And then when you wake up, the nightmare that I am a karta ends. The nightmare that I am a doer, I am the agent of action, and therefore subject to guilt. And I am the recipient of action, and therefore subject to hurt. All of that goes away in the wake of this knowledge. When karta itself, the concept of karta goes away, what to talk of karma? There is no karma. There is no karma phala. Karma is not there, karma phala is not there, because the karta has died. In the death of the karta, everything that belonged to the karta, who will claim it? Nobody. So if there was karma standing in the account of the karta, and the karta is gone because of knowledge, who will claim this bank balance? Nobody. It's like a dead person's bank account. No claimant is there. And so this is where we have to go. But in the beginning, the Shastra will keep talking about those distinctions which one is already produced, one collectively produced in the conscious, collective understanding, and that which we are reinscribing every day, that I is equal to only this body, like this, and that it has to, the Shastra has to speak to those distinctions and then transcend them. That's why we are spending a lot of time in this internal external business. Okay, so then in verse number in verse number what was that, 17th verse, we saw something else. What did we see? That this buddhi, this intellect, where is it? Inside or outside? Inside. Body wise it is inside. This buddhi which is inside, now we are getting to some very interesting things. The buddhi is inside, but where does it go? Outside. It goes roaming everywhere in search of entertainment. In search of entertainment. The buddhi is, where is it situated? Within the body, mind, sense complex. But where does it go? Outside, in search of distraction, in search of entertainment. And it needs a vehicle. It can't just walk. It needs a vehicle. What are the vehicles that it has? The sense organs. The eyes are the car. The ears are the plane. Like this. It needs a vehicle, and the vehicle is fueled by what? Raga Dvesha. The vehicle is fueled by Raga Dvesha. The car called the eyes, ears, nose, etc. The sense organ is the vehicle. The sense organs are fueled by Raga Dvesha. They go towards certain objects and they withdraw, they run away from certain other objects. So much for inside, outside. So this buddhi which is inside goes out regularly, punaha, repeatedly. Why? Because it is a bored buddhi. Why is it a bored buddhi? Because it doesn't know the truth of its own glory, and that it doesn't know that the person of Atmajnanam is immediately opens up a whole portal of entertainment. Oh, really? Along with Atmajnanam, you subscribe to some live stream of all kinds of shows. No, the whole Jagat becomes a show. Their own body becomes a show. Their own mind becomes a show. The whole Jagat becomes like a reality TV. You just focus on one person and the next, and then it is highly entertaining. As described in the last part of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, what is the definition of the Jnani? Atmani eva atmana tushtaha. Entertained by themselves, atmani tushtaha, entertained in themselves by themselves. Oh, I am also like that. I am also like a Jnani. How? I don't need people. I can just be in a room all by myself. Sure, give me your phone and computer. Then go sit in the room. Let me see how long you will sit. Yeah. Check in your phone and all your devices here. Whatever other zooming devices, all other devices you have, check them here. And then go sit in your room. Let's see how long you can entertain yourself. You'll come out of there running in 5-10 minutes. But Atmani eva atmana tushtaha means that the self-knowledge makes the buddhi sink into the heart, where its true place is. Makes the mind sink into the heart. That's why in the Shastra, the heart and mind are used, synonymously. And then if you go to an Ayurvedic doctor, they will say the mind is not with the heart. It's very restless. You have deranged vata, they will say. You have a vata that is deranged. And so what you have to do, you have to put lots of oil on the body and then take these medicines. That's the thing. An overactive mind, a mind given to anxiety, a mind given to restlessness, is not available. Forget Vedanta. It's of course not available for Vedanta. It's also not available for one's day-to-day goals, dreams, aspirations. It's just not available. And so the buddhi here, very beautifully described, the buddhi should be with you. It's antastha buddhi, it is described there, but what is that? Bahihi bahirgacchati. When? Punaha bahirgacchati. Car is waiting at the door. Step into the car. Does it have petrol? Lots of petrol is there. What is the petrol? Supreme unleaded raga dveshas. Filtered raga dveshas, nourished and purified. Oh, the antakarna is purified? No. The antakarna is full of pure raga and pure dvesha. And with the help of the raga, propelled by the raga dvesha, the car called the eyes lands towards a desirable object, steers the buddhi away from an undesirable object. Object includes event, situation, people, places, everything. And this is how the buddhi entertains itself, or tries to entertain itself, but keeps on coming back to its sorrow because it is not able to resolve it. No matter how how hard it tries, no matter where it goes for distraction, no matter where all it meanders and wanders, it does not have satisfaction, contentment centered on itself. This is what we saw in verse number 17. And then we also saw one more thing in verse number 17. What is that? This buddhi goes everywhere, but then the blame comes on the sakshi. It's the buddhi is the culprit. The buddhi is the one distracted. The buddhi is the one in need of entertainment. The buddhi is the one trying to avoid the truth of itself. But then, to other people, it looks like the sakshi is going. Why? Because the buddhi is illumined by the sakshi. Now we are coming to a little more nuanced understanding of what this sakshi does. The sakshi, the witness, illumines the buddhi, and the buddhi takes the credit. Buddhi says, no, I'm self-lit. What this sakshi? Boring sakshi, stupid sakshi, don't look at it. Yeah. And when the credits roll, it is what? Sense organs, taliyan, clap, clap, clap. And then sense objects, yes, they also have a role here. Clap, clap, clap. What would we do without them anyway? Sense objects, clap, clap, clap. Sense organs, applause. And then manaha, applause. Buddhi, big clap. Ahankara, the final bow, big clap. And then what else? Sakshi is not there in the credits that are rolling. Nobody calls out Sakshi by name. Nobody asks it to come on the stage. Nobody asks it to take a bow. Nobody gives it a flower bouquet. Sakshi goes away sad. No. Sakshi doesn't go away sad because Sakshi does not want all this. Because it's not an object, it cannot objectify itself. It objectifies everything, but it cannot objectify itself. Being self-evident, it need not objectify itself. Being full and free, Paramatma Dvayananda Purnaha, as we saw in the first verse, it does not need anything. It does not need the claps, it does not need the accolade, it does not need the acknowledgement. Life for the buddhi and ahankara became easier. Oh, you don't want the credit? Okay, sit there in the corner. We'll take the credit. We are fine without you. So the sakshi is seen to be moving. In fact, what happens in terms of a lay person's understanding, or rather we should call it non-understanding, because the lay person who is outside of Vedanta doesn't know all this. So the buddhi dharma, the attributes of the buddhi, the attributes of the body, the attributes of the mind, the attributes of the senses are transferred to the buddhi, the sakshi. And what does that sound like? I am hungry, I am angry, I am restless. I am sad, I am anxious. The I, sakshi, joins anxiety even though it's not anxious at all. The sakshi is apprehended along with the buddhi as the culprit, but the sakshi is not the culprit at all. And this dual consciousness, which is there before the gain of this knowledge, is very beautifully, we saw this yesterday, very beautifully elucidated where? In the Mundakopanishad, and before that even in the Kathopanishad, where two people are seen drinking the results of karma, but actually one is drinking. One is the light, the other is the shadow cast by the light. The light itself casts the shadow, and then everybody thinks there are two things. If you are sipping some fruit juice and your shadow is also there, what will the shadow do? That will also be seen to be sipping. So, similarly here also, in the Mundakopanishad, with the two birds story, the two birds who are the greatest of friends, there also there is a dissimilarity. They are the greatest of friends, they cannot be without one another. But then one of them is very, very restless, goes from branch to branch in search of berries, the other one just shines the light on the bird that is restless, on the restless bird. So, these two things, which are a kind of a lived reality, or I shouldn't say lived reality, experienced reality is better. So these two things which are a kind of an experienced reality, the Shastra does not immediately negate. It shows these two realities and shows that one is Satyam, the other one is Mithya. One is independent, the other one is dependent. Because at the level of mithya, the empirical reality, what is the beauty of this empirical reality? Mithya, it can neither be affirmed nor be denied. It cannot be denied because you see it, you can objectify it. It cannot be affirmed because it is always changing. It's always changing. No, nothing can be affirmed. You say pot, you say clay. Clay is the cause of pot. Can you affirm that? Only for the time being. Then you see the clay from another side, and then what do you see? The clay is the effect of particles and molecules, and maybe some minerals and all these things. Particles are themselves effects. And then we have to end up in Sakshi, the observer. That is why quantum physics is very exciting to Vedanta and Vedantins. And so, it ends in the observer. What is the observer? Sakshi. So the Sakshi is wrongly accused of being moving all the time. I'm hungry, I'm angry, I'm this, I'm that, I'm old, I'm young, I'm dead. That's the only thing you can't say. But then, so I'm the doer, I'm the recipient of actions, all these things. And then the example that is given to show this is the patch of sunlight coming through a chink in the roof. Is it moving or unmoving? No, unmoving. Just like the light of Sakshi. But then you move the hand underneath it, and what does it look like? It's moving. This is the buddhi. Buddhi, manaha, etc. With a moving buddhi, it looks like the Sakshi is moving. But then when you say the Sakshi is stationary, you get into another problem. And that is where we stopped that, you know. So therefore, what was talked about is that in the same manner, just like the moving hand makes the sunbeam move, similarly, due to the changing, moving buddhi all the time, the Sakshi also appears to be going and coming. The Sakshi also appears to be here and there. The Sakshi also appears to be, identified with the buddhi. And then in the 20th verse, again, we saw this. We can chant this again and look at this again. Na bahyo nantaras sakshi buddher deshe hita vubhau buddhyadi desha samshantau yatra bhatyasti tatra saha. So the experiment, like if supposing a skeptic were to ask, how do you know that the buddhi is not moving and it's not the Sakshi that is moving? Because you see both moving. So how do you know it's only the buddhi? What was suggested? Knock the buddhi off. Give it one with a stick. What will happen? It will be temporarily out. Or if you want to be kind to the buddhi, make it go to sleep. Give it a sedative. Make it go to sleep. Then, do you see the Sakshi moving or unmoving? Unmoving. Sakshi is there because when you come to, then you say, I was asleep. So the Sakshi was very much there, but since that which the illumined buddhi is not there, the Sakshi doesn't have a way to broadcast itself. So the Sakshi is very much there, and then this, so Swami Vidyaranya thought that with the 20th verse, this whole inner outer can be put to rest. No, cannot. Why? Because there is a Purva Paksha. What is Purva Paksha? Purva Paksha means a kind of an objection. An objection is raised because in the 20th verse what is said? There is no inside, there is no without. For who? For the Sakshi. This inside outside is only from the standpoint of the intellect. And why? How do we know this? When the buddhi is put to rest in samadhi, sleep, etc., then yatra bhati, whatever what is that? Whatever the light the Sakshi shines on, that is where the Sakshi obtains. So in sleep, what does the Sakshi illuminate? What does the Sakshi illuminate? Absence of buddhi. Absence of the mind is illuminated, just like the theatre lamp illumines what? The absence of the sponsors, the patrons and the audience. Why? The dancer has gone home, the audience also goes home, everybody has gone home, the only thing that is shining is the lamp. And what does the lamp illumine? Not just the presence of the people and the accompanists and the dancer and the patron, but also their absence. So looking at that empty hall, dance hall, what can we say? There is nothing here. The dance performance has concluded. We can conclude like that. So so when the buddhi is not there, the Sakshi highlights the absence of the buddhi. So even when you're having a near nirvikalpa moment in the meditation, and you say, aha, buddhi is going to sleep, then who is saying that? Yeah. Unfortunately, the buddhi itself is cognizing it, going into oblivion. So it's almost there, but then it catches itself and says, aha, I'm having a moment of thoughtlessness. Is that a thought or not? Ah, that is how it is. And so here, this shows us this, that the witness is neither inside nor outside, and these distinctions are only from the standpoint of the intellect. When the intellect is not there, where is the witness? It is wherever it is cognized, that is where it is there. Even if it's not cognized, it is there. Why? Because it cognizes the absence. Now here is an objection. This Purva Pakshi, the objector, has been listening to the Shastra carefully. We call them Purva Pakshi, objectors, because they have no Shraddha. These objectors, they have no Shraddha at all. What do they have? They have a skeptical, questioning mind. And what do they say? You are wrong. You are wrong. They find fault in the Shastra, and then what happens is that then the author gives an answer to that, a fitting answer. Actually, where are the Purva Pakshis located? Right here. Purva Pakshi is here or here. Purva Pakshi is not outside. It's all these objections you never knew you had, the Shastra themselves, the Upanishads themselves raise and answer. Adi Shankara himself raises and answers. Swami Vidyaranya likewise raises a very interesting observation. Let us see that one. Deshah kopi na bhaseta yadi tarhyastva desha bhak sarvadesha praklip yeah, that's a mouthful. Sarvadesha prakliptyaiva sarvagatvam na tu swatah. Yeah. So the objector here is very, very clever and points out an important thing. What does the objector say? The Purva Pakshi says, Deshaha kopina bhaseta. So you said that, you say what? You say that this is all pervasive. What? Sakshi is all pervasive, you said. All pervasive means what? It is everywhere. Everywhere, in the word everywhere, the word where is there or not? Yes. So, what are you getting at? The Purva Pakshi is getting at this fact that all pervasive means it includes space. It includes all spaces. All pervasive means it is in all spaces. Is the Sakshi up? Yes. Is it down? Yes. Does all pervasive include the front? Yes. The back? Yes. All pervasive includes everywhere. So much for you to say that the Sakshi does not exist in space. Sakshi does not exist in space, you said. Is not in any specific space. But when you say the Sakshi is all pervasive, that means what? The Sakshi is in all places at once. So you are contradicting yourself. Why? Because until you gave this example of the sleeping buddhi to show that the Sakshi doesn't move, you were okay. Now that you have given this example, the Sakshi doesn't move, when you say, but then there is, when the buddhi goes into a place of, like a causal space, into a place of repose, do space and time collapse or no? Space and time are there or no? They are not there. Space gone, time gone. There is no space, no time for that buddhi. For that buddhi that is sleeping, is there time and space? No. There is no time, there is no space. So they don't worry about the time here because the discussion is within and without. So he says that how do you know if there is no space and your Sakshi is all pervasive, how do you know that the Sakshi is illumining? Because how do you know that the buddhi which is not there is being, the not there buddhi, the absence of the buddhi is being illumined by the Sakshi? How do you know? Because with the cessation of the buddhi, time and space also get cancelled. Time and space and buddhi are all cancelled. And you said that this all-pervasive Sakshi illumines everything. And you also said that the Sakshi is beyond space, that cannot be looked at in a particular area or a particular space. If the Sakshi is beyond space and if time and space are not there, then what is it illumining? They don't understand it's illumining the absence. Because if you press on this point, it is illumining the absence, they will go to what? Shunya. Everything is eternally absent. So this is the contention. Tarhi, if so, meaning in the event, when the buddhi goes, when the thoughts are not there, then space doesn't even exist. If space doesn't exist, how can you call the Sakshi all-pervasive? Because all-pervasiveness is included in space. Very silly argument, but very interesting. How is this resolved? We'll come back and find out. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shantihi Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.